Welcome to the Simple Switch podcast, where you'll join me, Rachel, the founder of Simple Switch, to talk about conscious consumerism and positive impact purchasing. Spending our money in a way that helps our planet and the people on it can be complicated and frustrating, and we're passionate about bringing ease to your journey. Join us as we demystify big ideas about conscious consumerism and hear from amazing business owners using their work for positive change. Thanks for being here, and enjoy the show. Hi, Simple Switchers. Today's episode is really exciting. It's our first educational episode. So instead of interviewing one of our partners, we will be talking about a topic, a buzzword surrounding conscious consumerism, a way that we can help our planet and the people on it. Today, we'll be talking about zero waste and recycling, all the confusion and controversy that goes along with those things, as well as some practical solutions that you guys can take home and start trying. I got the huge honor of working with Rosie from EcoCycle right here in Boulder, Colorado. She has a great local knowledge of the system, but also a great knowledge of what you guys can be doing no matter what community you guys are in. Just a little personal note, the reason I wanted to start off with zero waste as a topic is because it was near and dear to my heart in my recent past. As I've been starting Simple Switch, I was trying to think of a way to decrease my environmental footprint that I was making, and waste diversion was one that really stopped me in my tracks as an easy fix that I had not made yet. So I spent 2018 with a little bit of a crazy mission. Anything that I touched, if I could not compost or recycle it, I had to take it with me. I ended up with a bag of trash for 6 months, weighed it at the end of 6 months, and then again at the end of the year. And just by diverting my waste, so this was things like starting to compost and making sure that I was intentionally recycling, I was able to decrease my landfill waste from the national average of 150 pounds a month to 6 pounds over that 6 months. This was a huge accomplishment and showed me how really easy it is for us to do this. I didn't make that many lifestyle changes. I started making some, like buying in bulk, but really a lot of it was just learning how to divert my trash correctly. So anyways, it was a wonderful experience getting to work with Rosie, and I hope that all of you enjoy the interview as much as I did. Here we go. Thanks for being here with us, Rosie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start really simple. Who are you, and what is it that you do?
So my name is Rosie, like you just said. I work for the campaigns department at EcoCycle. So EcoCycle is the nonprofit recycler for Boulder County, but we're one of the oldest and largest nonprofit recyclers in the U.S., and we do a lot of outreach and education and policy as well. And so I do a whole bunch of things. We all wear a lot of hats at this organization, but I run campaigns, I do volunteer coordination, I do a lot of outreach and presentations and things like that.
Very cool. Yeah, so as I said in the intro, I kind of had a very zero wasty year last year, and I met Rosie at one of her outreach events that she hosted about composting. So that was a very cool experience for me and getting to kind of know the basics, and she's really helpful. So I'm excited to have you. So why are you personally passionate about the work that you're doing at EcoCycle? Why does it matter? So
I am very passionate about sustainability in general. And I don't think I really have to talk about why specifically. That's an important thing to care about. But I've been in the zero waste kind of niche of the sustainability umbrella for a while now. And it's just, I think it's a really cool thing to talk about because obviously it's really important for us to be talking about energy and transportation and things like that. But zero waste is just, or waste in general is just something that regardless of who you are, you have a million decisions to make every single day when it comes to waste. You come in contact with it every single day, and it's not something that only applies to certain people. So you could either be doing it in a way that's sustainable and in a way that's helpful to the environment, or you could do it in a really unsustainable way. And so I think just the fact that we're all given those options every single day is a really important thing to engage with.
Yeah.
And talk about a lot.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. I just love how you said that because that makes a lot of sense, right? We get a ton of information thrown at us about the environmental crisis and what we can be doing, but some of those things are a little bit out of our control, whether it be policy decisions that we have to be really intentional about, or like you said, transportation, some of those larger scale things. But man, zero waste is something we can all participate in. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, okay, with that being said, we are getting all of that information thrown at us. We have a company value at Simple Switch, ease without apathy. So allowing people to kind of engage in things without feeling burned out by, guilt or the things that are coming at them. But I think this is one of those areas where some of our listeners might feel a little hopeless when it comes to the part they play in making this environmental change. Um, this is this is a question that I get asked to me a lot as an entrepreneur. What does the win look like? So if we as a society were to win at waste reduction, what do you think that would look like? And do you think it's, can we get there?
Yeah, so this is one of the things. I know you have a question about talking about the actual term zero waste, but yeah, it can be super.
Feel free to mix and match.
Yeah, it can definitely be discouraging because of the way that our society is set up. It's set up as a linear economy. It's set up to just you have to work hard to avoid all these single use items and all these wasteful practices. So it's we're not set up for success, and it can be really discouraging. But so zero waste is not. It doesn't mean that we think that you should create no waste, because in the way that our society is set up and the way our economy is set up, it's really not possible for you to do that without making some really enormous sacrifices.
Yeah.
So really just redesigning how we consume and make and dispose of our goods. We're working toward a circular economy. That's really the goal. And so that's really shouldn't be, it's important for all of us as individuals to be mindful of what we're consuming and how we're consuming it. Obviously, this is what you talk about all day. But it's also, it's not just that each individual has to refuse a straw. It doesn't fall there. It falls on the greater design of how our society works. And as voters and as community members, we need to work on pressuring people like manufacturers to redesign their products and set us up for success in that way. Zero waste is also, just in terms of recycling and composting, it's one of the most cost efficient ways to make a climate impact. And so if we all started recycling and composting in all of our communities in a real and successful way, that would be the equivalent of shutting down 20% of the power plants in the US.
Wow.
And yeah, according to sometimes it's hard to make kind of the connection between zero waste and the climate. But the statistic that we use a lot is the EPA has a statistic that says that 42% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions come from how we produce and consume and dispose of all of our stuff. So if we're ignoring like our stuff footprint, then that's, it's a huge chunk of the climate crisis that we're ignoring. So it's, we can really tackle that, then that's, and like I said, it's like it's a cost efficient thing to do, and we're making this stuff anyway, so we can either do it right or wrong. It's not like we have to redesign. I don't know. It's just something that I think is often ignored when we're talking.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're so right. Because that's not what we hear about. I mean, I remember, so at this event where I met Rosie, where we were talking about composting, they showed a really great video just talking about how that can make such a difference, because I've gotten a lot of questions as I've started composting from friends. One said, okay, well, I've been getting compostable things, but then throwing them away in the trash, right? Because I figure that's better, because then it will just become dirt, and it's like the same thing, right? If I'm throwing compostables into the landfill. And we learned, I'll let you say more, but we learned a little bit more about the way that landfills are treated differently than, what a composting would be. And so that actually never happens, right? Because it's treated so that the trash cannot break down.
Right. So that's definitely one of the questions I get every single day. It's such a good question. That composting is, and I'm going to talk about why recycling is a good idea, but composting is really just it's this perfect system that exists, and we just broke it entirely. And if we can go back to letting nature do its thing, then that is the true recycling.
Totally.
So yeah, the way that when we put organics in the landfill, I understand why people think that it would just break down in the landfill. But unfortunately, when you put those organics in an airtight situation, which is what a landfill is, it's airtight, it undergoes what's called anaerobic decomposition. So those organics need access to oxygen in order to break down in the way that we want them to. And when they're put in in an airtight landfill, then they just, not only do they really not break down, they break down super, super slowly, but also they just start to release methane instead. And so, which is something that they wouldn't do under oxygen-rich circumstances. So when they release methane, that's a powerhouse of a greenhouse gas that's
Yeah.
84 times more potent than CO2 as a heat trapping gas on the short term. So it's
Wow.
really something we care about. So yeah, when we
And
put
it's such an easy switch, right? Like, I mean, you can use those same materials. You have the same amount of waste. Say you're, grabbing your kitchen scraps, throw them in the compost. That makes a positive difference and pulls those things out potentially and helps with the food growth. And it's just amazing to me. The composting thing has won my heart over in the last year.
Totally, me too. I'm obsessed with compost because it's like, exactly like you said. It's either bad, it's creating methane, it's filling up our landfills, or it's not only like you're stopping that problem by not putting in the landfill, you're stopping landfill or you're stopping methane emissions, but also you're making nutrient dense soils to grow new food, and also those regenerated soils have the ability to actually draw carbon out of the atmosphere. So it's like black and white situation in terms of just like you have access to composting. Can you just move your hand over 5 inches and compost it instead?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so fun. We started a home composting bin with worms recently, and there's 8 people living in my house. We live in a community lifestyle, and it's been so fun for us to get to do that. And then it contributes to our garden. Our garden's way healthier and obviously so many things. So yeah, really fun. Okay, so sorry to bring it back. I took us on a rabbit trail because I just love composting, but yeah, so I guess the win, kind of what you're saying is like, it would have to be a combination of our personal practices changing, making those easy switches, and then putting some pressure on policy so that we have that circular economy. Does that sound right? That's kind of what the win would look like.
Definitely. Yeah. And yeah, I think as individuals putting pressure on legislation and on policy, but also as consumers putting pressure on who we buy from and how they're making their products, which is again what you're an expert on.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I love that. This hopelessness idea, I hear that from a lot of people, and I definitely have landed there, right? Where I'm just like, we can't do anything to make this right. Only more powerful people can do this, or, it would have to be a generation long. I was so encouraged yesterday. I was at Outdoor Retailer, and we were talking to a few B Corps and different partners, and then I went to a booth that makes shoe insoles, and it's a friend of my dad who I was with. So we were talking with them about how they make them and the sustainable practices they're trying to push. And he said, there's some things that we know are not great environmentally that we're trying to phase out, but we just can't yet, and so we're trying to innovate. And my dad has worked in technology and computers for a long time, and he said, what's interesting is I remember when we said it would be completely impossible to eliminate CFCs. And he was like, 3 years later, they were gone. So that feels really encouraging to me when we think about, oh, this is hopeless. Like, it's such a big part of our life. There are steps that we could take to get those things, single-use plastics and other things out. So
yeah,
sorry, that's another rabbit trail. But
examples of like, yeah, you can make all these excuses about how we've built a lifestyle around these things and stuff, but like, yeah, CFCs is actually an example that I use all the time. That's like, nope, everyone just decided to do it, and then it happened, and then we've never gone back. Like, it wasn't.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, so that feels really hopeful to me, and I'm sure to a lot of our listeners, that those things are possible. And it really, it takes each one of us, and it takes a lot of intentionality, but I think we're going to get there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you touched on this a little bit, but like, simple definition, what is zero waste? What does that mean? It's kind of a buzzword.
Yeah. So like I said, it's not that it sounds intimidating to some folks, that it sounds like, that we're asking you to give up waste to, essentially generate zero waste. And like I said, that's really not possible in navigating our current economy and society. So it's really just about, first of all, it's about, recycling and composting as much of the waste as you can. Obviously correctly, don't just like throw plastic into the compost. But also it's just really about the upstream. So just about conscious consumption of, single-use items and things like that. So just to reduce that waste in the first place, so that, not only are you diverting it from the landfill, but you're just avoiding having it in the first place. And so, like I said, it's about an individual like you, collecting your trash in a jar is so cool. But also just as an economy, redesigning what we're doing into a circular model. So like Loop is an example of this that's coming up right now. So if I buy my ice cream, I get it in a stainless steel container from Haagen-Dazs. When I'm done with it, I send it back to Haagen-Dazs and they reuse it. That's an example of
Awesome.
a situation. And that's, that makes so much more sense if it's designed well and there's the infrastructure for it. That makes so much more sense than just, buying it in a little plastic covered cup and then throwing it away.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I always say this. I feel like I get to work with the people who are just like the best of the best at this, right? Because they are choosing to create these innovative solutions to these problems, but also doing it in a way that's like really winsome and cool for consumers. So, for instance, a partner that we're talking with right now about bringing on specifically for Plastic Free July is they realized, so I have a baby niece and baby nephew, and they're always eating those pouches that have like applesauce and baby food and stuff inside, which are really convenient. And honestly, as someone who cares for little children every once in a while, like I understand their existence, but she's created a reusable version of that where you can, be making those foods and putting them in this pouch and using that convenience. So, but it's cool to see consumers, saying, okay, well, we do have this thing. We don't have to cut it out, but we need to make it better. Like, why would we choose to leave it stagnant and leave it where it was? So
Absolutely.
that's cool. It's cool to hear about that.
Very cool.
Okay. Here's the hard-hitting questions that I get a lot and a lot of times don't know how to answer. There's a lot of controversy around specifically with recycling. It's confusing. We're hearing stories of mismanagement overseas. Just the word China with recycling gets thrown around a lot. High costs, conflicting views on whether it's even worth it, different materials. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, EcoCycle is a recycler. So we are contracted to operate the Boulder County Recycling Center, which is the local materials recovery facility here in Boulder County. So, but first and foremost, we are a mission-based nonprofit. So although really the only money that we make, or most of the money that we make, is through selling those materials on the recycling markets, if we went out of business because people just stopped using single-use products and just started redesigning and reusing and things like that, then that would be the best. Like we would be super happy about that. We want to recycle everything that we can because it makes sense to do so. But if we moved toward a circular economy where that wasn't necessary, then that's our main mission. We want to reduce as much as we can on the front end.
I love that. Reduce, reuse, recycle, right? And that's in that order.
Right, exactly.
Oh, that's cool that you guys care about that.
We throw in rot and redesign and things like that even before we say
cool.
We always say recycling is not like, it's great. It's silly not to recycle, just again in our current economy and our current society, but it's not the answer. It's not like, it's a stepping stone to circular economy, but it's not the be all end all.
Definitely.
There's several reasons for that. So for something like first of all, there's so many different materials and they all have a really different impact and a different footprint and a different recyclability. So like aluminum is pretty costly and energy intensive and pretty damaging to the environment to mine and then make into aluminum. So we have to mine, bauxite ore, and then we have to turn it into aluminum. And then from there, to use all that energy and water just to turn it into a Sprite can and then drink it for 2 seconds and then throw it in the landfill, that is such a stupid thing to do. You can take that aluminum and you can actually recycle it infinitely. You can turn it back into a can as many times as you want and it won't lose quality. And so when you look at like the money and the energy and the water use of making a new can versus recycling that can, it's staggering. I mean, it's not comparable really. So we should be recycling that can because we already made the aluminum. And, we don't want to be like mining our own landfills for this valuable material in the future. But that being said, there are other things like, now a lot of people will drink Sprite. I'm just using the Sprite example because that's the first thing I said. If you are drinking Sprite out of a plastic bottle, then plastic bottles they don't have the same impact. They don't have the same recyclability as an aluminum can. So, plastic is just kind of its own category. And I think it is being treated more and more like its own category these days, which is awesome. Because people are becoming more aware of things like microplastics and the China markets and things like that. So with with plastics, it's not really this infinite thing. Plastics can be recycled depending on which kind of plastic it is, one or two times, and that thing usually goes to the landfill after it's used one or two times anyway, and then that doesn't actually slow down how many fossil fuels we're using to make new plastics.
Yeah.
Still, it's not being turned back into the same thing. So that brings me to the China question, which is, yeah, again, something I get every single day these days.
I'm sure.
It's great that people like know about it and are reading about it. So yeah, we as a nation have kind of found ourselves in a big pickle with China because we are, we're cranking out this insane amount of plastic and plastic single-use items. And many, many, many recyclers across the US were just marketing those plastics to China because you can either, it's really just kind of a business approach. You can either just invest a lot in your sorting materials and making strict guidelines and investing in establishing and maintaining local sustainable markets and doing outreach to your community so that they're only recycling what is actually recyclable. Or you can just not do a lot of that and just kind of throw it over the ocean. And it's not as clean a stream, so local markets won't take it. And so then China was taking it. Now they're not taking it at all. So
Gotcha.
those recyclers that we're marketing to China are really floundering because they just don't have the markets or the facilities to deal with the materials that their communities are giving them. So yeah, it's a huge deal because our markets are just, it's a huge ripple effect across the US. Boulder County, we're doing fine. We weren't selling to China anyway, and we have many of the same markets that we did when we first began in 1976. But that being said, we're tied to the rest of the U.S. and we're certainly seeing some crazy things happening in American recycling markets.
Yeah.
So I think that, overall, this is this could be a really cool thing, actually, like a cool opportunity for us because once we start seeing all this plastic actually pile up in front of us, we can't just like throw it away, literally across the ocean anymore.
Yeah.
That's when we have to start to think about creative ways to just like, we have to think, why are we even making, polystyrene things? Like, why are we making styrofoam cups? There's no one will buy it. We can't recycle it.
Yeah.
Like, let's just redesign that. And we have to kind of start talking amongst ourselves and thinking of creative and innovative solutions. So back to your original question.
All of that related for sure.
Yeah. I just, big picture, definitely recycling. Like I said, totally depending on every material is different in terms of how helpful it is to be recycling it really, and the impact that recycling that item has. But as a recycler, we will always say, we care about reducing and redesigning and composting and things like that far before we care about recycling, even though, but if we ignore recycling and we don't build the infrastructure and we don't have those markets, then that is a silly thing to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of how much we currently have.
Yeah, and it does catch a lot of that waste. Hopefully you're using, people are, I think Kick the Plastic is a campaign I've seen recently, or Kick Single Use or something like that. Hopefully people are doing that reduction. But then if you're not, one thing that I thought was really interesting when I was doing, my more intentional year was that I would save things. Almost everything that I ended up having was single use plastic, especially bags. And then at the end, before I weighed my trash, I would take it to y'all's facility, the hard to recycle materials. And it was interesting how much they were able to take. But even those things are so much less recyclable. Yeah, I just love everything you had to say. So kind of like top 3 recyclable things that have kind of that aluminum status. What are those? What are the easy ones that, are really important to be recycling because they're really, everything's important to be recycled. But these ones... Does that make sense?
Yeah. So aluminum is a great one because, like I said, it's infinitely recyclable. It's energy intensive to mine in the first place, and it's light too, so you can ship it around.
Yeah,
a huge carbon impact. So glass is also infinitely recyclable. That's awesome. Just inherently, the material is really great. Just obviously to melt down and then turn into a new bottle or whatever. The tricky part about glass is that it totally depends on your local facilities and infrastructure because glass is actually really heavy. So, if you're in something like a mountain town and you're nowhere near a glass market, then, shipping all that glass down there is probably going to offset any good you would do by recycling it anyway. So that's
Mm.
sometimes, even though glass is inherently super recyclable, depending on the facilities and the infrastructure, it won't be recyclable if you're somewhere where that doesn't make sense. But so here we have in the Boulder County area, the Denver area, we have a great closed loop system on glass. So all of our markets are in the state, and we have a
Yeah,
really
that's so cool. You guys talked about that on the tour. And does that have to do with the fact that we have so many like breweries that are looking for glass bottles around?
um
Or not necessarily?
well, so a lot of it is just due to Momentum, which is the local glass recycler around Broomfield. So they were previously in Utah, and we also have Coors here, which is obviously a huge part of the glass market. So when I don't want to give us credit for having Momentum move here, but we definitely were interested in having them move here. So now, if you recycle your bottle, we will sort it out at the recycling center, and then we'll send it to Momentum, and then they have these cool lasers where they'll take out contamination sort of by color, and then it can get turned back into a bottle at Coors or Rocky Mountain Bottling.
Awesome.
And then, yeah, the breweries play into that, but those are kind of the big players on glass. So here, because of that infrastructure, if I have to buy a single use item and I have an option to buy it in aluminum or glass over plastic, I'll always do that.
Yeah.
But always check with your local guidelines. And then cardboard is a funny one because corrugated cardboard, like a cardboard box, a pizza box, an Amazon box, whatever. That is historically a really valuable material in the markets. So typically, in the past, we could offset things like plastic that don't pay very well at all with things like corrugated cardboard. So we take both and then we kind of break even, and then nobody gets landfilled. Right now, because of various things, including fiber markets, but also what we call the Amazon effect, where the markets are just getting flooded with corrugated cardboard because of
Oh, yeah.
shopping. Corrugated cardboard it's really low right now. Hopefully it'll come back up, but I'm just giving you kind of an update of where we are right now. But typically,
No, that's great.
I hate to see corrugated cardboard in the recycling or in the trash. I love to see it in the recycling.
Yes.
In the trash because it is a valuable thing, and if we can't even, if people can't get on board with recycling cardboard, then that's really that's just kind of the first step to take. If you're someone that doesn't recycle at all, you should at least please be recycling cardboard.
Yeah, that's great. So you kind of just were speaking to this, so it's a really natural transition, but we're spoiled, right, in Boulder County with this closed loop. I remember when I went for the tour, you guys have like a train that goes right by, and that's why you built your, factory there, or your center there, so that you could just put the recyclables right on the train. And so it takes away from those transportation costs as well.
Yeah.
How have you seen waste, go differently in different communities? What does Boulder County do that stands apart, and what are some good rules of thumb for listeners who maybe aren't in a community that's set up for success in that way?
Yep. Yeah, it's always, when we're talking about sustainability issues and zero waste issues, privilege is such an important thing to talk about because it's so unfair to shame people for producing single-use plastic when economically they have no other option. But also just geographically, like we have the infrastructure here that so many communities just might not have. So even if you're an individual who really cares about it, there's really nothing, you're going to feel guilty about it, even though it's not really on you to set up that infrastructure. Boulder County, we are unique in that, like I said, we were one of the first areas to get, I don't know if I said this, we're one of the first counties or municipalities to start recycling back in the 70s.
Cool.
I don't quote me on this maybe, but I think top 10, first 10 municipalities in the US.
Very cool. Nice.
So EcoCycle it just started as a total grassroots thing back in 76. So just because our recycling program goes so far back, it just started being part of the culture early on. So I think that's a big part of it. And it is really unique in that we are a nonprofit recycler. Usually, it's pretty typical for someone who is maybe a landfill company to also run the recycling center. So there are only, I think, 4 major nonprofit recyclers in the US. So that's another unique part of it, that there's a lot of outreach and campaigns and policy stuff that we do that just wouldn't be in the business plan for other recyclers in other towns. plus that reduction piece. I mean, Boulder is just a groovy place in general, where the cities, like City of Boulder, partners with us on so many things, and they're super willing to help us out with funding, and to partner with us on a variety of really cool things. Like the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials is actually, City of Boulder is a partner on that. So you were talking
Cool.
about where we can, divert our harder to recycle things. City of Boulder was willing to make that happen with us. Um, so yeah, we have access to an industrial composter. So A1 Organics is out in Weld County, but you can get your compost picked up on the curb, and that's definitely a privilege that many cities don't have access to.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, I think it's a combination of just we've been here for a while, it's part of the culture, and partnership with local governments, but also just the fact that originally when EcoCycle started and recycling started, it was just an absolutely grassroots movement. So there was huge buy-in from the community. So it's not just that we are shouting at you all to recycle. It's just the whole community has been into it and is into it ever since 1976.
Yeah.
So if you are in a place where this is not the case, because this is kind of the perfect storm for zero waste here, I think, like we said, when we talk about zero waste, it's important to talk about recycling and composting, but it's more important to talk about reduction and consumption in the first place. So again, like having access to bulk stores is a privilege for sure. And I think that there's just it's becoming more and more of kind of a movement to start navigating our grocery stores and to reduce in the first place and get creative and share tips and stuff. And I think that can be pretty universal. Just learning those tricks and trades and things like that.
Absolutely.
Definitely checking with your local guidelines if you have a recycling program or a composting program or both is really important, because it is always really key to keep in mind that guidelines change from place to place based on local markets and facilities. So just familiarizing yourself with what's happening locally is really important. And like we said, voting, but also voting with your dollar is important wherever you live.
Totally. Oh, that's so good. Thank you for that perspective. Yeah, I definitely have friends who live, maybe in southern states or different things, who are making these, great efforts to do the recycling composting thing, but also just change the way that they are ingesting in the first place.
Right.
You mentioned this, and I just want to clarify. I said reduce, reuse, recycle, and you said you guys add a few more terms to that. Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, I don't know if EcoCycle has one that we say always in the same order or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of words that are popping up that we should put before recycling. So yeah, reduce and reuse is awesome. And then redesign is just one that I always say too, because that, falls into the infrastructure part that we were talking about in the circular economy. And then rot is another one that I say, because like, again, you can recycle your number one PETE bottle, but if it gets turned into a carpet, that carpet's still going to go to the trash. If you can have a compostable drinking vessel or something like that, composting, like we talked about, is just such a beautiful thing that we should all be engaging with. So if we're having like the 3 R's and we're ignoring compost, then we're missing a big chunk of it.
Totally. I love that. And redesign, redesign is a huge deal. Some of us have the ability to be actually redesigning systems. So if you're that listener, do it. And if not, let's put some pressure on other people to be those redesigners as well. That's cool. Yeah. I love that. Just kind of a curiosity question. So for those people who do bring up like, oh, I had a compostable, so that's better than nothing. Let's say like those compostable plastic cups that we actually see a lot of in Boulder. Yeah. If people were getting that but did not have an industrial composting facility nearby, is it better to use that than it would be to use like a recyclable plastic?
Such a good question. And it really depends on who you ask and what they care about, I think, because that's a really complex one, because I think that all of these compostable plastics, quote unquote plastics, corn plastics, showing up everywhere in places showing up everywhere when industrial composting facilities are not universally accessible is kind of putting the cart before the horse in some ways. if what you're talking about is downstream impact. So like we said, if you are putting, an organic material, whether it's food waste or, a PLA plastic in the landfill, it's going to break down anaerobically and it's going to release methane. So, I mean, of course, that methane impact is different if you're talking about a PLA plastic and food waste, just because of the organic mass that they both have, is different. But so in that way, yeah, it's not great to put that in the landfill. It's not like a really great feel good action. But if what you're talking about is the upstream impact, then that's a different story than a plastic cup. If you have a PLA cup, then you're disengaging with the fossil fuel end of plastic production, which is something that we do care about, obviously. But maybe, if you're a pollinator person, then you would care about that conventionally grown GMO corn. Like there's so many aspects to it that it's hard to break it down in a black and white way. I think, though, just the simplest answer is that we shouldn't be really redesigning single-use cups back into single-use cups. We should be, a single-use cup is a single-use cup, whether it's compostable or not. The best version of a cup is a reusable cup, because
Definitely.
even if you are using a compostable cup and that cup is going to the compost, that's still a lot of water and energy and money and everything that it just took to make that cup that you drank out of for 15 seconds to just put it in a waste stream anyway. When if you used a stainless steel cup? Like Vessel is a great example of that. Like if we all shared cups and just kind of washed them and could deposit them in a kiosk, then that makes so much more sense than a compostable cup.
I haven't heard of Vessel. I'll have to look into that. But it's fun to see, larger events, larger organizations doing that kind of thing. I recently, for instance, saw that a church, instead of having, because, they'll have coffee available for the people who are going to the church. They had, congregants bring in all their old mugs, and now they have this huge mug wall, and they just get a couple people to wash those mugs. So instead of, taking out all the trash here, they're able to just do that. And it's like cuter and more fun anyway when we're doing that kind of thing. It adds intentionality and sometimes style even. So
absolutely. And it always saves money too.
Yeah, that's important. Important point. Cool. Okay. So lastly, what are some easy at-home ways that listeners can be more responsible when it comes to waste?
So this really, obviously a really great and important question to wrap things up. But definitely it depends on who you are and what kind of waste stream you produce in the first place. And we all produce different waste streams. So I think what I always say is, if you are someone that's looking to improve how much waste you produce, then doing a little self-assessment is such a cool way to start, because it adds intentionality, like you were saying, and it adds self-awareness. So there's so many things that we consume without even thinking about it, that you might not even know what your biggest, offenders are in terms of single-use plastics or whatever you're throwing away. So I'm so excited for Plastic Free July, but I always do like a self-assessment just to kind of like regroup, and I always make someone else do it with me, like my roommate or my sister or something. So what I do is just I'll keep my my trash and recycling compost full, for a week before, and then before I take it out, I'll just like literally go through it and be like, what am I throwing away? And so I can pick out, I'll just kind of examine every item. And so I'll look like, if the first time I did this last year, I was like, wow, I have a lot of like energy bar wrappers, and like you can't recycle those, you can't compost them. There's no option where I could buy them where the packaging would be recyclable or compostable. So it wouldn't be that hard for me to just make them. So I just started making them. And so I took one item, and I'm sure you've had similar experiences with your trash journey, but I took kind of like one item at a time and just like made a swap. And so if you start with the really easy ones, like, I don't know, like my waste stream is super different from somebody else's, but
no, but it's good to hear those practical examples. I think it helps people spark, what theirs are. I love that idea of the self-assessment.
Totally. Yeah. So like, even if the packaging is recyclable or compostable, like then I would move on to like, I got rid of my trash items, but I still have these single-use kombucha bottles. Like I had a bunch of glass kombucha bottles. So I was like, what could I do there? So I started filling up growlers at Natural Grocers with kombucha for each bottle. Anyway, so I think just like, first step is doing an assessment. And then I think start with plastics as much as you can. Obviously, there's some things that you just are not going to be able to avoid if you need that item. But I think it's between, is there a bulk option? Is there a recyclable option? And then even like with me, like ice cream, I just had these like ice cream containers. There's not a recyclable or compostable version of that right now. But I was like, you know what? I don't even like ice cream that much. Like honestly, like I would rather eat, pie or whatever. Like it was just,
Yeah,
I was like, I could, I wouldn't really suffer at all if I gave that up. So,
totally.
I'll just skip out on that more than I do.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I just love the idea of that strategy of the for anything, right? So like when we're talking about Simple Switch, that's like what we're doing is like, what am I ingesting? How can I switch it to a better company that's doing better things in the world? But just that idea of having every strategy in your life be, okay, first a self-assessment and then being able to take those small, small steps. So that's where I feel like a lot of people hit burnout is they like do a self-assessment and they're like, I'm making all the negative impact, and then just burning out and deciding not to make any changes as opposed to being able to have grace with yourself and say, okay, where can I just chip away at one little thing and then chip away at another little thing?
Totally.
Man, yeah, I love that attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, those wrappers for like bars and stuff was a huge one for me too. It's tricky.
I know. Same, because I'm always hungry. I always need like chocolate. So
One of my housemates makes things like that. She like makes snacks.
right.
I don't know. She's amazing. I need to do more of that.
I started to make like like kind of protein bars, and then I would just put them in like the beeswax wraps, and
Oh, nice.
it was cute and fun.
Cool. Love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, we always ask guests this. How can our listeners be supporting you?
So if you are a Boulder County person, we have what's called the Eco Leader Network, and it dates back to the 70s when when recycling was starting. It's essentially just being an ambassador of zero waste in wherever you hang out, really. So if we just had the ideas, if we had one person in every neighborhood, school, office, gym, whatever, that cares about zero waste, understands, can spread the word, can point out places where we could improve, and then start to work toward those improvements, can answer questions, etc. Then that's when we're really going to become a shining example of a zero waste community.
Yeah.
So if you go to ecocycle.org/network, you can sign up to be an eco leader. You can also email me at rosie@ecocycle.org. If you are someone that's outside of Boulder County, if you're in Denver, you can be part of our Denver campaign because we're working hard to improve the situation at our.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, and even if you're not in either of those areas, we definitely have. If you sign up for our email list, we definitely have opportunities for you to engage in. We work on state legislation. We just passed a major bill last session. So we can always, we always have like petitions to sign and legislators to write to and things like that. And then, I think just regardless of where you are, we have also a site called EcoCycle Solutions Hub. And that's just really like our mission as an organization is to make kind of templates. So like you were talking about, we can do all this cool stuff in Boulder County because of the infrastructure, because of the community members, because of the policies that we have. But if we're just like a bubble, then it's really not worth it. So we always try to just make templates that can then be exported. So EcoCycle Solutions Hub is really that. It's if you're, regardless of where you are, regardless of who you are, you can learn more about how to build that infrastructure and policy and community buy-in in your own community. And we always need, volunteers for things like zero waste events and stuff like that. So if you just go to our website, you can see all the opportunities to get involved.
Awesome. Well, I am both an eco leader and on your website or on your email list, so I can vouch for those being really great resources and easy ways to get involved. You guys, this is not like a huge commitment that you'd be making, but it really just allows you to have a little bit more of that education just at your fingertips, which is awesome. Cool. Well, is there anything else that you want to share with us? Anything else you think we should know?
I think the more I talk to people about zero waste, the more I understand like how intersectional all of this is. So whether you're talking about human rights or whatever, conscious consuming or whatever it is, like all of it combines so well. And I think it's so cool how we all like find our way into each other's circles. Because it really all falls together. The more you start to buy based on nutrition, the more you're going to be zero waste, the more you're going to be buying consciously and socially responsibly. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you for what you do because all of it plays into to what I do. So
yeah, I'm also very thankful for the way the community is so supportive of each other and how it just naturally flows. I think you're so right. Yeah, when you decide you want to be someone who buys organic, then that like very much goes into the zero waste, because a lot of those people at the head of that stream care about both things, and it's cool to see how those things happen. And yeah, you spoke a little bit about privilege and just the way that we can really be caring for people by the way that we're consuming as well. Love that.
Right.
And thank you, yeah, for being with us and for the work that you're doing, and for taking time to speak to all of us. I think it's going to be really valuable for a lot of people.
Yay, I hope so.
Thanks so much for joining me today. If you like this episode, you can support us by leaving a great review, sharing with your friends, and subscribing. Thanks for caring about our planet and the people on it. We'll see you again soon.